and welcome to Sierra Make. Today's video is part 2 of altering some things I found at the thrift store. Last week I took a blue velvet t-shirt and turned it into this outfit I'm wearing right here. If you haven't seen that video, go check it out up in the card first. And if you have seen that video, I hope you're excited for today because I'm going to be altering those shoes that I found. So let's jump in. Here's a little reminder of what those shoes look like. They were actually half this price, so $5 at the thrift store, and they have a little heel on them. So I'm going to want to remove the heel and the sole, and I'm going to do that with this. This is a heat gun, and I'm going to be using it to melt the glue between the sole and the shoe. If you don't have a heat gun, you could also use a hair blow dryer, but it will be a little bit more difficult to use and probably take more time. I'm also going to need some glue of my own, so I'm going to be using some E6000. You could also use shoe glue or maybe contact cement, but I'm using E6000 because it's what I have on hand and I have a lot of it. If you've guessed by now, I will be taking off the sole and removing the heel, and so I need something to replace it with, which will be these foam mats. So I grabbed these out of a free pile. These are kids' play mats. You're supposed to set them up and it makes a nice little cushion mat. This type of foam is also often used for cosplay or LARPing, but today I will be using it to make some platform shoes. Some other tools I will use are these clamps and flat sheets of metal so that I can hold the foam together as the glue is curing, and I also end up using a bandsaw to do most of my shaping. Oh, and one more thing, don't forget safety equipment, so goggles when you're using power tools, use a mask for fumes, some gloves, I also used pliers for grabbing hot things, and a hammer. That's it for the main items I used, so let's get to tearing apart these shoes. First, I wanted an approximate sole size, though, so I went ahead and traced around the outside of the shoe while the heel was still on, and I cut that out so that I could use this as a pattern when I cut out my sole out of the foam pieces. So now I can start taking apart my actual shoe. So I've got this heat gun, and I'm going to use it to heat up the bottom of the shoe. Now, I have never disassembled a shoe before, but I've seen a few videos on how shoes are made, so I know that the sole is glued to the bottom of the shoe, and I know that they often use a screw to screw in the heels. So I figured I'd start with the easiest part and just melt off the sole because I wanted to see if it would work, and I knew that that would probably be the easiest part to disassemble first. That's so cool. And sure enough, after heating it up a bit, the glue started to melt, and I was able to separate the sole from the shoe. This is so interesting. Please ignore the background music, but if you're doing this project, I highly recommend having something to listen to in the background because a lot of these processes took quite a while to actually complete. But now you can see that the sole is coming off, and you can also see how they wrapped that blue velvet fabric around the bottom of the shoe, so I want to make sure that I don't mess with that part, and I just remove the sole. So now I've reached the heel portion of the shoe, and I wasn't quite sure where to go from here. So I tried heating up the space between the heel and the shoe, hoping that maybe it was just glued together and I could rip it apart. Yeah, no, it's not.
So I read that heels are normally like screwed in, so that's why it won't move. But when I looked on the inside, which is where the screw should be, I don't know if you can see in there. There we go, using the flashlight. There is up there what looks like could be a screw, but it doesn't have a screw top. So maybe it's like a nail. And then this is a metal piece, like right here. It's like a giant metal chunk. And I have no idea why it's a metal chunk and not a screw. And I don't know how I'm supposed to remove this at all. I wonder if this is hollow and if I can, oh, that's what I'm gonna try to. I'm gonna see if I can get at it from the bottom because I have no idea how I'm supposed to take that out.
Reminder, this is a learning process, the first time I've ever demolished a shoe, so it goes by a lot faster on the second one.
Ooh, look at that. Popped right out. All right, let's see. All right, you see that? I don't know what weirdo was like, yeah, we're gonna use this weird prong thing instead of a screw. Yeah, so there's this weird prong thing. I'm going to just kind of try and hammer that out, and we'll see, yeah. We'll see what we can do with that. I think I'm just gonna keep working this until it comes out.
I know I called them a weirdo, but I was just frustrated because it was harder to take off than I anticipated, so I ended up just sawing the heel in half like you see here. This way I'd be able to access those little prongs easier and find a way to remove them. Little update on where we're at with this shoe. It's starting to come off. As you can see, I had so much trouble because it's like pronged. Yeah, this is where I'm at. And now I'm trying to take it apart. So basically I melted the top so that the plastic would like be more malleable, and then I hammered the prongs through it to get it out. And now I'm going to melt it a little bit more and just try and wiggle it the rest of the way out. It's a struggle. Woohoo! I got it off. Look at that. Look at that. And the prongs are still there, so I can, like, I don't know, leave them there, and when I do the other heel, like, it'll stay, hold in place, I don't know, whatever. But, yeah, it's off. Boom. Look at that. Woo! Damn. Yay, so now that one shoe is done, we can do the other one, and faster, so I decided to take the heel off first this time, so I'm just removing that little heel sole, and then I'm going to cut it in half and cut a little chunk out so I have closer access to those prongs. Then I will heat up that center bit and grab some pliers and tear out that plastic piece so that I can hammer in the prongs. That way the plastic piece isn't in the way, and I can just hit all of the prongs at once with my hammer. I'm kind of going back and forth between heating up the heel and hammering out those prongs so that I can finally tear the entire heel off.
All right, heel is off. That's what I should have done the first time around, was just take the heel off. And I mean, honestly, I wouldn't mind keeping the rubber sole here, except I took it off on the other side, so I guess I have to take it off on this one. Oh well. I didn't even have to tear out the inside or anything. Inside's the same, I just rip off the heel.
So with the heel off, now it's time to take the sole off. So I just heat it up so the glue is nice and sticky, and I peel off that sole. I'm using these pliers this time around so that I don't really burn my fingers. And there we go, it's off.
Easy. Easy. Well, not easy, but easier. Easier than the first one.
Finally, these shoes are properly torn apart, so it's time to move on to the next step, which is cutting out the shape of my sole out of all of the pieces of foam I'm going to use. So I have that pattern that I made earlier, and I'm just tracing it onto the foam and cutting it out with a little bit of extra space just in case around the edge. And just a quick check to make sure I have enough foam there to make the heel and everything, and I do, so let's cut out the rest. So by coincidence, the colors I have here is basically a rainbow, so I'm going to layer them up as a rainbow color, and it's going to be super, super fun and festive. Here's all of our pieces cut out and stacked, but before I glue them together, I wanted to do a test glue to make sure that my glue would be fine and it wouldn't look weird. So here's my test pieces, and it glued together fine. It's, you know, pretty stiff, which is nice actually. But you can see the ripples from the texture of the foam. So if I wanted to get rid of the texture, I figured I had to make it smooth. And how do you make things smooth? Sand it. But that was taking forever, and so then I thought, can I cut the texture off and then maybe sand it just to smooth it out a bit? And I can. Look at that. So I'm actually going to slice the texture that I can off first, and then maybe I'll sand it. Maybe. So here you can see one of the textured pieces, so I'm just using that bandsaw again, but this time to slice off the little pieces of texture that's on one side of that foam. And here's the end result. You can see it's mostly off, which is great, so I'm just going to do that to all of my other pieces. Now, you want to be careful here. First of all, don't cut your fingers. But second of all, you really just want to take off the texture. Don't cut too far into your foam, otherwise you lose all of that height. After that was done, I used the sander to get any spots that I wasn't able to get with the bandsaw, and now I can finally glue it together. For this part, we've got to grab our glue. Remember, I'm using E6000. It's industrial strength, it's flexible, and it's great for weather and outdoors. And I'm also grabbing those clamps and my metal sheets. Let's start to glue. Alright, for the gluing process, there's not a whole lot to it. You just want to make sure that you cover the whole part of the foam. You're not missing any spots. And be sure to use quite a bit of glue, because if you don't use a lot, then it probably won't stick very well. And, if you use too much, then you can just wipe it off of the sides and stuff. It's not a big deal. But using too little, then your shoe's going to fall apart. So here I just spread it around the piece of foam that I had, and I'm going to place it onto the other piece of foam, press it together, and then we're just going to keep gluing and stacking and gluing and stacking and gluing and stacking. This took a really long time. So be patient here, because the glue takes a while to be squeezed out of the bottle. It doesn't come out quickly, which is nice because then you have a little bit more control over where you place it. But it also means that this takes a really long time. Also, you might notice that some of my pieces, that purple one in the beginning and these yellow pieces, are not the full shape of the foot. And that's because they're actually going to be where the heel is. And I was limited on the amount of foam that I had in those colors. So this was my little scapegoat to try and use those colors without having to cut the full foot out, and it doesn't really matter because that's where the heel's going to be, so it doesn't need to be the full foot. Hello, we like to use all of our materials. Here you'll notice I'm switching between two tubes of glue. They're both E6000, but one of them is thicker than the other, and so I'm just using that for the center part and doing the thin stuff around all of the empty spaces. So we've got our glue between our layers. I'm just making sure that they're even on top of each other. They're not like sloped towards one way, and they're pressed down. Now we can place the metal sheet on top, sandwiching the foam in between. Grab those clamps and clamp down our foam. This is to press the pieces of foam together while it cures overnight. E6000 has to cure for at least 24 hours, so I'm going to come back to it the next day.
24 hours later.
Let's just take these clamps off and remove the metal pieces. They're staying together. And finally, now that all of my foam is glued together in a platform, it's time to shape it to the shape of the shoe. So first, I just sliced off those top pieces that I don't really need. I didn't quite do the curve of the shoe just yet. I'm just doing a basic rough outline. Then I just sliced around the edges to make sure that all of the pieces of foam were in line with each other. So when I glued them together, they weren't necessarily the same size exactly, and they weren't perfectly lined up. So what I'm doing now is just slicing around the edges to make sure it's nice and perfectly lined up, and we get a beautiful horizontal line like you see right here. You can see it's just a little bit jaggedy because I'm still just doing the rough shape, but it looks pretty cool so far, so I'm excited to do the rest of the shaping. So we're going to try and do that slope now. Let me tell you, this was probably the hardest part of the shoe. I mean, it was hard to get the heel off of the shoe, but I figured it out and it was super easy the following time. This was difficult because I had to get the shape of that heel slope on both sides and make sure that it was even and also the same height on both sides. So I struggled a lot with this bit. I did as best I could. You can decide whether I did a good job at the end. But yes, this part was difficult. So if I were to do platform shoes again using foam, I would make sure it was just a flat foot platform, not a heeled platform. Now that I have the rough shape done, I can check it against the shoes. And just hope that this, is okay. That fits, it's a perfect curvature to it. So one foot turned out perfect and the other turned out just a little too steep, but there's nothing I can do about it without destroying both of them. So we're going to make do with what we've got. And now it's time to do the rest of the shaping. So I'm just marking maybe a 1/4 inch away from the shoe, and I'm going to cut that out so that we get something that's nice and close to the shoe and the correct shape. And we are going to cut it, this time being careful to try and get some really smooth, clean lines. And I don't know, I think that's pretty clean. There's not a whole lot of jagged saw marks. It's pretty smooth, and it also is about the right shape of the shoe. So I think it's time to glue the shoe down onto the platform.
Last thing you need to do is glue it down.
So, for gluing the shoe, I just took the rest of my E6000 and spread it all around the bottom of the shoe and pressed it in place onto the platform, making sure that it wasn't like crooked or anything. I also grabbed my small hammer and hammered down those pegs that was in the heel, and that's mostly just to make sure that it's not sticking up and into your foot when you wear the shoe. And then I grabbed the clamps and a piece of foam and placed the piece of foam on the toe and clamped that down. The foam is so that I don't mess up that beautiful velvet, and also I didn't clamp it down super hard so that I didn't accidentally squish the toe. And then I took a longer clamp and I clamped the heel down. This clamp has a loose bottom which lets it go with the curve of that heel, and it also screws down so it can really reach into the boot. And I did the exact same thing with the other shoe, so we're putting glue all around the outside. I also ended up using some of the shoe glue I had for that inside bit because I was running out of glue. Then I pressed it down onto the platform, hammering in that little nail thing at the end and really pressing down to make sure that all of the glue is pressed firmly into the foam. Then I clamped the toe and the heel, and I'm clamping it on top of that little metal piece so we still have a flat bottom. And I'm going to let that sit for another 24 hours and come back to it the next day.
1 day later.
Alright, I was gonna film a full body shot later, but I tried on the shoes. I should still let them cure for a little bit, but I tried them on and they're so freaking cool. Here, let me show you. Like, I can't. I had to walk around and then a little bit. They're like, these are so cool. Damn. Here, let's zoom in. Damn. Yeah, if you couldn't tell, I was pretty excited with how these turned out. I mean, the camera isn't really capturing just how colorful these shoes are because there's so much color there that it's confusing the camera. But these are vibrant and beautiful and surprisingly easy to walk around in. You can see the steps I'm taking here. I've got a little bit of a squish, which actually doesn't make it hard to walk. It adds a little bit of extra comfort there. Now time to try them on with the outfit. You can see the camera's still having trouble picking up all of that color, but those look so freaking cool! I've got to say, changing up the shoes like that totally changed the look of the outfit. Before, when it was just the blue velvet heels, it looked a little bit more classic and maybe fancy even. But now, with these rainbow platforms, it looks a lot more fun. And, I mean, I don't have to even say anything. You can see how confident this outfit made me feel. It was comfortable and it looked cute. These shoes with that extra squish from the foam on the bottom actually made it really comfortable to walk in, and it definitely alleviated that heeled arch feeling that you get with a lot of heels. And as I said in the previous video, that outfit is super comfortable and it's not super tight and it's really, really soft and just really, really comfortable, as I said again and again. So yes, I am super thrilled with how these shoes turned out, especially since this is my first time doing this kind of project. If you agree and you like these shoes, go ahead and hit the like button. You know where it is. Also, comment down below if this has inspired you to maybe alter a pair of shoes of your own. If you know someone else who's also interested in trying to change up their shoe game, go ahead and share this video with them. And please subscribe if you like this type of content. I will see you next Friday at 3. Thank you for watching. Blah.
Teeny tiny hammer here.
You can see I've started to make a mess.
Body ball, all that foam dust on them, and I went like ouch. It doesn't hurt, but it sounds like it hurts.
First of all, I'm tall now.
Yeah, I mean, I've already destroyed the shoe, so.
I was too excited.